As the years go by, the movie Coraline only seems to get bigger and bigger. Especially every Halloween, it just seems to cement itself more and more as a classic, which I'm all for because Coraline is one of my favorite movies of all time. But even with all that, you know what I don't see many people talking about? The book. You know, the book that the movie is based on? Yeah, this one. What are you looking at? What's weird? The original Coraline novel, released back in 2002, is where all of this got started. And as many times as I have watched the Henry Selick 2009 film adaptation, I've only read the book once. It was a long time ago, and I don't remember too much aside from this vague recollection of it being notably different from the movie. So today, I just want to reread this thing and see just how different it is. So to start, we should probably talk about the movie. You know, kind of work backwards a little bit. So Coraline, the movie, is all about this girl named, well, take a guess, who just moved from Pontiac, Michigan to a boarding house in Oregon named the Pink Palace. Her parents are super busy and honestly kind of neglectful, always focused on this like gardening catalog they're working on. Their downstairs neighbors are two retired actresses named Miss Spink and Miss Forcible who have a million of the exact same kind of dog, some alive, most dead. Coraline's upstairs neighbor is this super tall blue guy named Mr. Bobinski. Apparently a lot of people dressed up as him for Halloween this year. I don't know, it's some kind of TikTok thing, I guess. I don't know, man, I wasn't paying attention. But I do love Mr. Bobinski. He's a great character, and he claims to be training this jumping mouse circus, but Coraline and her family just kind of think he's crazy. The only other kid Coraline's age here is this edgelord dude named Wybie, short for Wyborn, whose grandma actually owns and grew up in the Pink Palace. He likes to kind of roam around the grounds with this stray black cat, and Coraline really hates Wybie. She honestly kind of bullies him for a lot of the film. One of the first things she does is she gets all up in his face and calls him, "Why were you born?" Fucking Christ, dude. Maybe back off a bit. It's a little bit extreme. But the next day, Coraline receives a gift from Wybie, a strange little doll with button eyes that is dressed exactly like Coraline. All right, maybe Coraline was right in hating this little creep. Damn. I'm kidding. Apparently, he just found this at his grandma's house in all of her stuff, and it just is a crazy coincidence that it looks exactly like Coraline. Anyway, Coraline's still bored, still kind of neglected, and just starts roaming around the house exploring, and finds this weird little door that's been, like, wallpapered over for some reason. She manages to get it open, only to find a wall of bricks. Oh shit. But later that night, she opens it again, and this time it opens up to this weird, dark, musty purple tunnel. Going through it, she finds this like mirror version of her house where she meets her other mother and her other father. These two look and sound exactly like Coraline's real parents, except they're loving and fun and kind and attentive and exciting. But they are just a little bit off, with both of them having these dark black buttons where their eyes should be, just like the doll Wybie found. But you know, aside from that weird little bit, the other world's actually pretty great. The other Mr. Bobinski actually has a jumping mouse circus. The other Spink and Forcible put on actual theatrical acrobatic performances. The other father planted this entire gigantic garden just for Coraline. And there's even another Wybie who the other mother made damn sure couldn't speak. It is everything Coraline could have wanted. So when the other mother says she could potentially stay there forever, Coraline actually considers it. That is, until she is told that first she would have to sew those same creepy black buttons into her eyes. This freaks Coraline out, so she dips, but when she gets back home, she finds that her parents have been kidnapped by the other mother. Her real parents, that is. So, teaming up with that black cat, who can actually speak English in the other world, and with this tiny little green stone that she got from the real Spink and Forcible in hand, she heads back into the other world to find her parents. Yeah, that. Once there, she sees the other mother, now looking taller, paler, more monster-like, and she is quickly put into a timeout for her disobedience. But in this, like, timeout dimension, Coraline meets three creepy ghost kids, the past victims of the other mother. They call her the Beldam and claim that she spied on them through the eyes of that same doll that Wybie found, and used that to lure them into her trap and convince them to sew the buttons into their eyes, which essentially sold her their souls. And as long as she still has those missing eyes, she still has their souls. And one of these ghost kids is actually the long-lost sister of Wybie's grandmother, which explains how Wybie found the doll in the first place. Speaking of, the other Wybie is actually able to find Coraline in this weird little timeout dimension and save her, but that's about all he can do. So the Black Cat then convinces Coraline to challenge the other mother to a game, knowing she wouldn't be able to refuse. If Coraline can manage to find the ghost kid's eyes and her missing parents, the beldam has to let her go free. But if she fails, Coraline agrees to let her sew the buttons into her eyes and stay with her forever. And luckily for Coraline, that green rock that she got from Miss Spink and Forcible turned out to be extremely helpful because looking through it allows her to see the missing ghost kid's eyes. But the other world is only getting more dangerous and unstable. The other father is no longer this fun-loving dude. He's this weird, saggy little pumpkin man who's being forced to hunt Coraline down. The other Spink and Forcible are now this creepy monster thing living in an egg sack, and the other Bobinski is literally made of rats. Just made of fucking rats. Nevertheless, Coraline does manage to find the missing ghost kid's eyes and reach her final confrontation with the beldam, where she straight up just throws the Black Cat in her face, finds her real parents in this random snow globe, and just kind of makes a break for it. She grabs the cat, runs through the little door, makes it all the way to the other side, and locks the door behind her before the beldam can catch up. So, you know, everything seems fine now. Right? Her parents are back, the ghost kids are freed, it's all good, right? No, of course not. In all of the chaos of the fight, the beldam's hand was actually severed from her arm and is now crawling through, sneaking past the door to get into Coraline's world and steal the key. I guess hoping to unlock the door and let the beldam come through. Can the beldam come through to the real world? Is that like possible? So Coraline plans to take the key to the door to this deep dark well near the Pink Palace and drop it all the way down where it'll never be found. But unfortunately, the beldam's hand followed Coraline and attacked. Luckily, Wybie was able to swoop in and kind of save Coraline, and then Coraline was able to kind of save Wybie as he nearly fell down the well, and then they killed the hand. Can you kill a hand? They shattered it into pieces, dropped it and the key down the well, closed the well, and that's the Coraline movie. That's the movie. And I'm gonna be honest, I remember this book being a lot more different than it actually was. The basic outlines of this novel are more or less the same as what we got in the movie, and the movie even adapts some of scenes basically word for word. But there are a laundry list of small changes, cut or altered scenes, and one huge, really huge difference that changes a lot about how the story plays out. For one, while the movie takes place in Oregon, the book actually takes place in the UK. They don't really specify as to where, but, you know, they call apartments flats, they talk about fish fingers, it's British. And you know, this isn't a huge change, it doesn't affect too much, but I've always found it interesting because of the film's director, Henry Selick's, specific reasoning as to why he chose to put this specifically in Oregon. Apparently, it was to pay homage to the Ashland, Oregon Shakespeare festivals, which explains why there's all these random Shakespeare quotes and references just strewn about the story, including in that one scene where Coraline's gone shopping for school clothes, there's those two dudes just running around yelling Shakespeare stuff. I don't know. I've always found this to be an exceedingly strange, unnecessary, and just flat out dorky change, dude. I mean, it doesn't really have anything to do with anything. But, you know, it does kind of play into my long-running perception of Henry Selick as this, like, unbelievably imaginative and visionary creative who also just happens to be a shockingly tame and kind of boring dude. Also, the animation studio Laika that made the film, they're located in Oregon, that probably did something to influence this change as well. I just remember in the director's commentary, Henry Selick was like, "Oh yes, the Shakespeare festivals. I really like them, and that's why you see this." It's just like he's a very soft-spoken man for as insane as his films are. So yeah, the book is decidedly more British. Crikey. But as the story kicks off, you know, things are still in pretty familiar territory. You know, Coraline's parents are still busy all the time, so she spends most of her days exploring around the Pink Palace, even though in the book, I don't really think it was called the Pink Palace. I don't really think it had a name at all, actually. You know, she goes around the woods, finds that crazy deep well that's going to be important later. She goes to the tennis court. Wait, did I see that right? I don't remember there being a tennis court in the movie. But I do remember it being... Oh, f***. There was not a tennis court in the movie, but there was one in the fucking game. There was a tennis court in the PlayStation 2 Coraline game, meaning that that game actually took stuff from the books that the movie didn't. Are you... That's so fucking stupid. No fucking way, dude. I guess that explains the tennis court mini game thing, at least. But either way, Coraline still goes to see Miss Spink and Miss Forcible, and Mr. Bobinski is actually not really in the book all that much. In fact, for the vast majority of the story, they don't even refer to him by name. They just call him the crazy old man upstairs. It's not until the end of the book that you even learn his name, and it's not even Bobinski. His name is Mr. Bobo. His canonical name in that book is Mr. Bobo. Speaking of small differences, though, there's the door, the door to the other world. It's this tiny little thing, wallpapered off, and it's like the size of a doggy door. In the book, it's this big, brown, ornate wooden door, classic fucking door. It's not hidden or obscured in any way. It's just in a room that Coraline doesn't go into that often. But when Coraline does go through the door in the book, it's often described as being like dark, damn near pitch black, and weirdly alive, which is definitely creepy, but it also doesn't really go anywhere, so I just figured it was worth mentioning. But on the other side, Coraline, of course, meets her other mother, who, in the book, is already a much less convincing doppelganger. She is taller, she is paler, she is more monster-like, she has these long, creepy fingers, and of course, she has those dark button eyes. It's kind of like how she appears about, 2/3 through the movie, but, right from the start. But, she starts sinking herself into Coraline's life in basically the same way as the film, whereas the other father, on the other hand, is not got a whole lot to do here. He's got a much smaller role in the book. He's there, he's hanging out, he's having fun, but, there's no fun piano number to a They Might Be Giants song, and most importantly, or most notably, I guess, there's no garden. That was kind of his whole thing. Pretty much every single scene with the garden in the movie is completely original, made up for the film, and I would assume that's because in the book, where did it land? In the book, they never really establish what it is Coraline's parents are actually working on. The garden catalog thing was made up for the movie as well, so I would assume all the garden scenes were just there to expand on that new idea. In the book, they're just sort of vaguely busy with something that we never really find out. And I think the change for the film is actually really good. It makes everything feel a lot more connected. It feels like much more of a true intrusion into Coraline's life by the Beldam, and it also gives the other father something to do. Coraline then meets the Black Cat and learns that he can talk in the other world, and this is one of those scenes that plays out damn near word from book to movie, and fair, it's a pretty iconic part of the story, so, keeping it pretty well tight. I don't know what I'm saying. Cat scene, there, yes. But then Coraline goes to see the other Miss Spink and Miss Forcible, and suddenly, the dogs are talking as well. So it's still a theater full of dogs like in the movie, but now the dog sitting next to her is just constantly talking throughout the entire performance. So based on some of the stuff we've covered already, it may not surprise you to find out that the flying trapeze act that Spink and Forcible do while quoting a bunch of random Shakespeare stuff, that was made up for the movie. But the other Spink and Forcible's performance in the book does still include a lot of big circus acts, unicycles, juggling, and knife throwing, which in the book is the act that Coraline's brought up on stage to participate in. And luckily, she is not skewered through the eyes with a blade and is given a box of chocolates as a prize. A box of chocolates which the dog sitting next to her in the theater just keeps pestering her for. Apparently dogs can eat chocolate in this world without dying. The dog says that it's all that they eat, and I guess Coraline has no way to prove him wrong, so she lets him have his fill. If he's lying, I guess we never found out. As the show rolls on, Coraline asks how long it's supposed to go for, to which the dog next to her says, forever, at which point Coraline quietly exits the theater. I can't really blame her on that one. Unfortunately for all you Bobinski fans out there, there is no jumping mouse circus scene in the other world in this book. There is a little bit of rat acrobatics, but it just takes place randomly in Coraline's bedroom for all of 2 seconds. I don't know, it's weird. And of course, in the movie, this would be around the point where Coraline is offered to stay in the other world as long as she sews those, damn, that's a dense forest of fricatives. She's offered to stay in the other world as long as she sews those black buttons into her eyes. Nailed it. But the weird thing in the book is when this happens. In the movie, this takes place about an hour in, so like 2/3 through the story, and is kind of the kickoff point for Act 3. In the book, where is it? In the book, we're 45 pages in to like a 160-page book, so we are not even really a fourth of the way through. Coraline then runs back to her world, finds that her parents are missing, heads back to the other world, and then gets put into that timeout dimension where she meets the 3 ghost children and decides to challenge the other mother to the game for her freedom. So, no major changes there. But as Coraline sets off to find the 3 ghost kids' eyes, things do kind of start to go off the rails a little bit. First, like I said, there's no garden, so the entire scene from the movie where Coraline is chased by the other father on this like runaway robo-mantis, gone. Or I guess it would be more appropriate to say it never existed. Instead, she just finds the first ghost kid's eye in her bedroom's toy bin for some reason. But once she does, the other mother tries to sabotage her search by sending a legit giant windstorm basically right through her bedroom door. Coraline just yells out, "Hey, come on! Play fair," and the winds die down. As a weirdly accommodating gesture from the beldam to actually, knock it off when she was told to. From there, the Spink Enforceable and even the Mr. Bobo scenes play out basically the same from book to movie, which is a kind of strange considering Mr. Bobo hasn't even really been in this book in the first place. But it's during this sequence in the book that we get the primary cutscene that never made it into the movie. The scene that, when I read it as a teenager, really made me think, oh, we're going in a different direction. It essentially inspired this entire video. Partway through Coraline's hunt for the ghost eyes, the other mother confronts her and tries to pull a little bit more sabotage, pointing Coraline in the direction of this creepy cellar door, which Coraline does check out just in case. She's pretty sure it's a trap, but she's gonna check it out just in case. And inside this dark, musty cellar is the other father, or at least what's left of him. The book basically describes him as being this soft, mushy, large mound of pale clay that smells kind of sour and has these pathetic little stick arms and legs and a puffy face with basically no features except for those 2 black button eyes, which are barely hanging onto its face at this point. Coraline briefly talks to this thing in front of her and is kind of freaked out about it, but mostly just kind of takes pity on it. It's pathetic. This is not her father. It's not even her other father. It's just some thing that the other mother made to help lure Coraline into her trap. And this thing just sort of creepily writhes around in fear until it snaps to attention and tells Coraline to run because the beldam is compelling it to attack. It doesn't want to attack her, but it can't fight the beldam's control. And soon it just lashes out at Coraline, who is only able to make it out alive by gouging those button eyes out of its face and leaving it blinded. So yeah, that was a much more nightmarish scene than anything I would have ever expected to come out of this book going in. Now, I know Coraline is technically a horror film, but just for the whole family. It's meant to be creepy, but I kind of get the sense that this scene was maybe viewed as being just a tick too far into the disturbing territory because it does not show up anywhere in the movie. Which, I guess is fair. Beyond being just a little too disturbing even for Coraline, it's not the most plot-relevant scene. I mean, even in the story, it is literally a distraction. So, instead they cut this bit for the movie and repurposed a few little bits of the idea into the garden scene. So, instead of turning into this pale mound of stink, the other father in the movie is showing up more and more like a saggy pumpkin thing. He's shorter, he's plumper, he's kind of going all orangey, and his hair is turning into stems. Then, when he attacks Coraline in the garden scene, he is looking even more gourd-like, but now he's got that doughy pale thing going on. And, he does tell Coraline that he doesn't want to hurt her, even though the beldam is making him, but rather than doing so through her sheer force of control, he's just been locked into the robo-mantis. Also, while editing this video, I remembered that they actually repurposed the whole gouging out the button eyes thing from this scene in the book for the finale scene against the other mother. When Coraline throws the cat at the other mother's face, it rips off the button eyes, which doesn't happen in the book. Yeah, I am glad that some remnants of this cellar scene did make it into the movie because I really liked how much more visceral the horror was in that bit. But I do think the changes made for the movie help the story ultimately flow a lot better. But after that, Coraline finds her parents in the snow globe, throws the cat at the beldam, makes a break for it back to her world, and is followed by the other mother's hand. But in the book, rather than being this weird robotic armature hand, it's an actual fleshy, creepy human-esque hand. But yeah, Coraline, back home, ghost kids freed, parents safe, hand going after her to find the key. That part. Yes, this part. So, Coraline heads to that deep well on the premises, opens it up, and sets up an innocuous tea party scene on top of it using her dolls and this picnic blanket, and uses the key then to trick the beldam into essentially tossing itself down the well, which was obscured by the blanket and the tea party, so they didn't know it was there. And I guess hands can see. But yeah, Coraline tricks the hand basically into throwing itself down a well where it will never get out, closes the well, and at that point the book's basically over. But did you notice something missing? Throughout all this talk about the book, one thing that never got mentioned once? Yeah, Wybie. One of the most important characters in the entire movie was made up for the movie. They're not in the book, which of course causes a huge domino chain of differences between the book and the movie. No Wybie means no grandma who owns the Pink Palace, no direct connection between the ghost kids and the people that Coraline knows in her real life, and most importantly, no Coraline doll. Yeah, the doll that is how the beldam spied on these kids to begin with in the movie is the primary focus of the opening of the film, and is now one of the most important pieces of Coraline iconography with tons of merch made specifically around it. It's not there. This entire book is about people with doll's eyes, and the doll isn't in it. What the fuck? From what I recall, watching behind the scenes stuff about the movie, Wybie was essentially created to avoid Coraline, walking around and talking to herself the entire time. She's a pretty independent kid in the book, and that works great on paper and in text, where you can have all the narration dialogue and internal dialogue that you want, but when you're translating it into a film, a visual medium, it's not gonna make a particularly smooth translation. Coraline kind of needed someone to bounce off of more in the movie. I fucked up and I said book, I meant movie. Someone that's not a cat, that is. And speaking of, the cat could only talk in the other world, so in all of the scenes where she's in the real world, the cat would be no help to this particular issue. Also, making Wybie's grandma one of the sisters of the ghost children was just a perfect touch for the world building. And in the absence of the cellar scene with the other father, it's actually the other Wybie who manages to give us the scene where Coraline realizes that all the people she's been spending time with are just creations by the beldam. And yeah, the finale also gets a bit of an overhaul from book to movie. As usual, the bullet points are about the same, but the execution is so different. And as much as I do like the more clever plan that Coraline hatches to trap the beldam's hand in the book, stopping the beldam with Wybie kind of brings a lot more catharsis to the story. He saves her, then she saves him, and then they team up to stop the beldam together, and this is one of the first times in the entire story that Coraline is believed by anyone when she talks about the other world. Again, believed by someone who isn't a cat, at least. And also, after an entire movie of feeling alone and neglected, in this moment, Coraline finally has a real friend. And where the movie ends by really driving home this new sense of a thriving community at the Pink Palace where everyone gets together and gardens, in the book, after defeating the beldam's hand, Coraline just sort of goes home. She has a couple of brief conversations with Miss Spink and Forcible and Mr. Bobo, not her parents, mind you, just the neighbors, and then she goes back home and gets to bed and starts thinking about how going to school next week is not going to be all that scary after this. That's how the book ends. It's certainly not a bad ending by any means. I liked the touch that she could hear music playing and imagine that it was the Mouse Circus band. I thought that was cute. But I do find it kind of weird that Coraline starts the story being alone and kind of ends it still being alone. I mean, I guess she has a better rapport with her neighbors and a random black cat now, but that's kind of it. The movie's choice to instead end with a greater focus of the community that now surrounds Coraline, I think was a much better ending, a really nice change. And it's a change that primarily comes from the inclusion of Wybie. Now look, I didn't really set out to make this video a battle of the Coralines or anything. I didn't really care about figuring out which version of the story was better. I just wanted to sit down and examine the differences between my favorite movie, or one of my favorite movies. Nothing replaces Nightmare Before Christmas for me, but one of my favorite movies and the book that it was based on. But even still, after all of this, even though the broad strokes are kind of the same, I can't help but come away from this experiment feeling like, yeah, the movie is by far the more definitive version of the Coraline story, at least for me. What? At least for me. I do kind of think the movie has the much more satisfying story, like, all around. Everything in it is more connected and intentional and deliberate, which I would kind of hope, considering how they animated it. You have to be pretty deliberate with that. The book carries a lot more of a surreal, off-putting, like, twisted Alice in Wonderland thing, which is definitely a vibe, don't get me wrong. It feels a little bit more like a dark fairy tale and is definitely a much stronger bit of, like, horror in a lot of ways. It's a bit more scary and unnerving, but it feels like it's just missing that extra little bit of heart that really helps the movie stick the landing a little bit better, which I guess is just sort of a byproduct of turning a horror novel into an animated family film, but you know. So for me at least, I do think it's movie all the way. It takes basically everything that worked in the book and refines it to damn near perfection. Seriously though, that tennis court shit's pissing me off. That PS2 game was god-awful, but now I have to like actually concede that it's a little bit more faithful to the book. That's fucking stupid, man. God damn it. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and now I gotta give a huge shout out to my Living in Denial channel members. Those being KO Productions, Ryan Wilkins, Kisara, Spooky Month 333, Not So Simple Grim, Princess Ella Bunny, Meme Boy 049, Reality in Colors, Sam Burger, Jake Artist 13, JBG 0801, Broken Pie, Revamp Skunk, Chiller Beans, Grace Strickland, L1 Brew 5, Hey It's Rosa, No Naha, Star Squared, Strange Fan 101, Glue Gunner, AR Hester, Dirk, Flip Flop, Mario Underground, Wolfglar, Bucket Studios, Michael Milton, Z-Boot, Cyril Plays 656, Mimikyu199, Ciela Star, and Galaxy. If you want to join these people in getting shoutouts at the end of my videos, you can become a Living in Denial channel member by clicking the join button below, and you'd be helping the channel a lot with that. So thank you. Where the fuck did I put that book?